This is Feuerstein Vygotsky Script 2. It's the revision, and it will be divided into two videos. It says, continue with Feuerstein and his ideas. It says, Feuerstein noticed that by interacting with the children rather than administering standardized tests to them, their results improved. He developed an unorthodox methodology and a theory about the functioning about the human potential for modifiability, along with improved learning and functioning in the world, even for people with known genetic disorders such as Down syndrome. Now, RF equals Ruben Feuerstein, BW is the interviewer, and MLE is the mediated learning experience, a targeted intervention. RF. We've had an enormous opportunity to learn more about the way which the brain functions on an individual level. If you can find in some way to limit what was described before as a global condition, I can find the modifiability in the individual. An individual may have great difficulty with change, but if I find the proper way to reach them, I may create or encourage modifiability, which makes the individual function better. Now, what this means is that rather than having them pigeonholed by some diagnostic standardized test, he takes each individual. Does that sound familiar? And he works with them individually around the function of their mind. And if he can find a way to help them move forward in their thinking processes, then he can assess where they have the potential to go. And all these other things we've talked about kick into line to be tools to help you to create interventions to help a person develop their capacity for thinking. So the BW says, so the MLE is a mechanism for creating change. When testing a person, you teach them. RF, if you can create change, you can then predict the potential or propensity for further change. The MLE is but a method in my interaction with you, not just to make you know something in a passive way, but how to produce it, how to create it. I'm not just passing to you information, but passing to you all that you need to know in order to be able to learn by yourself. Now, I submit to you that this is the way Jesus teaches. If you look at the scriptural record and you look, just take Peter's life, for example, where the Savior starts with Peter where he is. But over time, Peter's mind opens and blossoms and is flooded with light and intelligence, and he can exercise his agency to comprehend. And what does he do? What is he led to do? To become the prophet of the former day saints. So this has marvelous potential because it's not just teaching, which you're saying you want to do with your guided interventions, but you're also helping that person grow and develop as a person and develop a greater capacity to interact with the Lord and to obtain knowledge for themselves. This quote from the article to which I've just given you is a link, shows the foundation of his work. I won't be examining his work exhaustively because of lack of time and space in this study guide. But I highly recommend that you spend time with him, especially in the modern programs based on his work. There is a good YouTube video showing his associates working with teachers, and they use modern terminology to describe how his theories are meant to be applied. And I've put that into a thumbnail, which will come up on the screen for you. Okay, continuing with my script. He has some tools to guide you in serving learners who have severe learning disabilities as well as others. His stubborn conviction that IQ is not a limiting factor in human thinking ability is encouraging, and it prepares you to work in Sternberg's model, where he comes at this from a different direction and will give you even more insight, that is, on how to live life intelligently. Okay? That's found in Study Guide page 368 of the PDF version. I'm also giving you an online link to modern-day Feuerstein. Those associated with his school of thought are very active in teacher training programs right now. The YouTube presentation ties his theory to practical thinking skills we are all familiar with and makes his theory more accessible. I hope as you review this, you will be struck again and again by how these researchers have discovered principles of human development that we can embrace. I encourage you to undertake your own course of research and study these men's works and the others that will be cited. I cannot copy and paste or paraphrase all the many insights available through them. I'm trying rather to show you what's available to be known in these critical areas, in hopes you will be encouraged to elaborate your own approach and develop your own interventionist philosophy. If we can just keep in mind that we want to understand these things as they function in the culture of godliness and in the great plan of happiness, in which we hope to abide forever, but especially here and now in mortality. And we want that understanding to fill the whole earth. The phrase, "no child left behind," has special eternal meaning for us. Now, the answers provided by the theory of MLE to this and all the previous questions may be crystallized in our firm conviction that the organism is an open system and that redevelopment must produce changes of an alloplastic as well as of an autoplastic nature. And we'll proceed to define those two words for you. Very useful. The development of autoplasticity is limited only by the extent of the effort that society is prepared to invest in order to ensure that all children develop to their maximum potential. In short, the goal set for retarded performers, according to the theory of MLE, is adaptation to a normal environment, as opposed to adapting the environment to meet the specific needs of the retarded performer. That's from Feuerstein, Instrumental Enrichment, and it's quoted in the Study Guide, page 369 of the PDF version. This is so important. Okay. They learn to adapt to a normal environment instead of having to have the environment adapted to them. Okay, now this is quoting from Freud. He's the one who sort of defines these two words, autoplastic and alloplastic. In describing the adaptational mechanisms of the human organism, Freud in 1924 distinguished between alloplastic and autoplastic responses to changes in the environment. Adaptation of an alloplastic nature is directed at modifying the external environment. It's the force behind man's need to conquer nature and harness its resources to meet humanity's needs. It's all reflected in the various forms of aggressive behavior, in which situations perceived as threatening may be neutralized by attacking the source of danger. On its own, successful alloplastic response is limited to those situations in which environmental change is possible, and that's not in all cases. In many instances, however, it is the individual himself who must adapt to external reality. Such changes constitute an autoplastic means of adaptation and are reflected in a state of internal flexibility that enables the individual to cope with sudden and novel changes in the environment. Autoplastic adaptation depends heavily on the presence of adequate cognitive processes and autonomous exercises of control over those functions that render the cognitive system flexible and constantly modifiable. And when we get into the checklists of what can go wrong, we'll find that one of those things is people haven't developed the ability to perceive what needs to be changed, and they don't have the tools in order to change it. In terms of adaptation, it is the autoplastic changes that are crucial. The extent to which external changes may be brought about is contingent upon the organism's ability to initiate such changes, and very, very often we simply don't have the capacity to initiate the changes out there in the real world to make things as we would like them to be. And so we need to focus on adapting inwardly. It should now be evident that when we speak of cognitive modifiability, we're concerned not with the acquisition of bits and pieces of knowledge or the mastery of specific academic vocational skills, but with, in the broadest sense, the ultimate destiny of the retarded performer. So this is not specifically designed for teaching as much as it is designed for helping the person acquire the skills of learning and understanding. Adequate cognitive functioning has implications that reach far beyond the academic requirements of the school or formal education system. Although a mastery of the 3 R's is a necessary prerequisite for integration into the modern technological society, success in such a social framework depends on the ability of the individual to use the ultimate destiny of the retarded performer. Adequate cognitive functions have implications that reach far beyond that. Although a mastery of the 3 R's is a necessary prerequisite for integration into modern technological society, success in such a social framework depends on the individual to use his own resources in drawing inferences, making decisions, planning ahead, to anticipate future contingencies. Because of the social and cultural discontinuity that marks today's society, the individual can no longer rely on an established order or traditional patterns of behavior. And that is so important. The people who are living today have lost the great cultural undergirdings that have held our society together since the founding of the nation, and to some degree even before that. Our social contract has eroded. Greater social, political, economic, and religious freedoms place a heavy burden of responsibility on the individual. Decisions must be made concerning employment, use of leisure time, political and religious affiliations, morality. In short, individual destiny is today more than ever before in the hands of the individual himself. Without the necessary cognitive tools, the individual cannot carve a future that will enable realization of his potential for growth. Now, think back to what we talked about with Brother Olson's model of how we help people find within themselves these things. You might want to go back now and spend a little time adding his tools to your toolkit, because in this situation it would be very useful. And an editor's note, it's interesting that the Sternberg talks about 3 ways of dealing with the environment intelligently: adaptation, modification, and something else, which I leave you to look up. The instrumental enrichment program is addressed not to any specific skill or content area, but to the process of learning itself. So we really have to keep that in mind. The contents around which each instrument is built serve only as a vehicle for the development, refinement, and crystallization of the functional prerequisites of thinking. Implicit in the conception of instrumental enrichment is the conviction that manifest low cognitive performance need not be regarded as a stable characteristic of an individual, and that systematic intervention directed at the correction of deficient functions will render the individual, the condition, reversible by producing a change in the cognitive structure of the individual. And that's found at the same citation. So what we have going on here then is a powerful set of tools and a powerful way of looking at a human being. They're not stuck in whatever intellectual pigeonhole we've placed them. They're capable, susceptible of enlargement. And I think you'll find that that's accepted in the gospel, and that it's a big part of the gospel plan of happiness. We've outrun our time now, so we'll stop here, and I will move on to making video 3, where we will continue this discussion. Thank you for joining me today.